This is MichMash, a weekly conversation where we try to unjumble an important and sometimes under-the-radar statewide story that affects you. I'm Zach Gorchow.
And I'm Alethia Kasben.
Alethia, we have worked together for 12 years, and there is one story that always remains at the top of the state capitol: Michigan's beat-up roads and how the state funds them. But there are peaks and valleys in how much attention the issue commands, and this week seems to be one of those peaks, doesn't it?
That is right. So the last several years have been pretty quiet on the road funding proposals. We haven't seen a lot of things floating out there, but now Governor Gretchen Whitmer is back in the mix with her first new road funding plan in 5 years. Listeners may recall in 2019, the governor tried a 45-cent per gallon increase in the fuel tax, and that went nowhere, which is putting it generously. Then in 2020, she used the State Transportation Commission to sell $3.5 billion in bonds, and that did expedite a lot of construction on the freeways, which our listeners who have labored through construction in places like I-96, I-75, US 127, and now are seeing gleaming new freeways know these projects well.
All too well. That 96 drive was a heck of a thing for quite a while. But the bonding plan was just a shot in the arm. Those funds are exhausted, and it's not the long-time funding solution virtually everyone agrees is needed, and the governor has said this herself. The governor's proposing several changes to add $3 billion a year to the road funding system. Now, let's break it down. There's some numbers here and some math for the listeners on what's in the Whitmer proposal.
So first, this is significant, but also kind of wonky. The governor is agreeing to, for the first time, a long-held Republican proposal that every tax that we pay at the pump should go to roads. So basically, we pay the 6% sales tax on our fuel purchases, but that doesn't go to roads. That goes to mostly schools and local governments. This plan would see all of that money go to roads. This can get a little sticky, though, because, like I said, that goes to schools and local governments, and Democrats do not especially want to take funding away from schools.
And the governor's plan makes it pretty clear. This will be held harmless, meaning schools and local governments will be made whole some way. They don't specify what, though.
Right.
Now, another source of funding for roads the governor's proposing. Do you remember that phrase, pot for potholes, around the time we were legalizing marijuana in the state of Michigan? That's another component. The governor proposes a new wholesale tax on recreational marijuana purchases, and all of those revenues, $500 million of them, would go to roads. Additionally, the governor is saying the state could reallocate $500 million it's spending on other items also to roads as well.
And then we have an even mushier aspect of this plan, $1.6 billion from other new taxes. The governor sort of vaguely presented a range of options. This could include an increase in the corporate income tax rate, which would increase what some but not all businesses pay, a new concept involving a tax on digital advertising, or a fee increase on heavy trucks, something that has also been proposed in the past and heavily opposed by industry.
So what is next? Well, businesses and Republicans are opposing tax increases, and particularly an increase in that corporate income tax rate you mentioned earlier. Democrats are receptive, but they aren't going to vote on tax increases without a deal with Republicans.
Republican Speaker Matt Hall has proposed a road funding plan as well, though he relies on existing revenue and not tax increases to get to roughly $3 billion more for roads. That, though, would lead to more spending reductions than what the governor proposes. And Republicans, continue to argue the state spending has increased significantly in the last 5 or so years. So it could be difficult, if not impossible, to convince them to raise taxes as part of a road funding plan.
Yeah, when it comes to the Republicans voting for a tax increase on this, I'll believe it when I see it. Now, Whitmer is the fix the damn roads governor. As we all know, the phrase has been said 8 trillion times in the governor's 6+ years as governor. And she has roughly 2 years left of her term to put a long-term road funding plan in place. But she needs the legislature, which now includes a Republican-led House, to do it.
And 2026 is a huge election year for all kinds of other players too, who might currently be in the legislature looking at a different office, and they don't want to vote on a tax or a fee increase in the next 2 years. The key here seems to be how big a package, the officials agree upon. Is this a $3 billion plan? Is it a little less? It's pretty apparent that the changes to the taxes paid at the pump, so putting that sales tax off of fuel and then putting that all to roads, everyone could agree on that. That's $1 billion more for roads without any other action.
Yeah, the Republicans have been talking about that for years. So the fact the governor is now signing on to it, it feels like that's low-hanging fruit and it's not a tax increase. But after that, it gets tricky. Republicans voting to increase the main tax on businesses really doesn't compute. They would be sticking it to their traditional allies if they did that. And there's a handful of Democrats who are going to be hesitant to cast a vote like that too. Of course, it's been the business community leading the charge to increase road funding for many years, but they'd much rather see that funded by motorists through their gas taxes, that 31-cent per gallon tax at the pump, and vehicle registration fees that we all pay on our birthday, than see more of their profits scooped up via the corporate income tax. Roads. 100 years from now, will this still be an issue, or will we finally have those flying cars and be able to complain about something else? We're going to take a short break and look at another major issue when we come back. What's happening with President Trump's various orders? Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel talks to Alethia when we come back to talk about her legal fight against them. Stick around.
Welcome back to MichMash. Joining me now is Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel. Attorney General, welcome to MichMash. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Attorney General, you have filed several legal challenges to the president's orders during his first weeks in office. Can you talk a little bit about, why this is an important action for you to take as the Attorney General, especially because Michigan, is a state that did support the president's reelection?
Sure. Well, firstly, I absolutely understand that, Donald Trump won the presidency. He is the duly elected president of the United States. He won the state of Michigan by, I think, approximately 80,000 votes. But again, he's a president. He is not a king. And what that means is that he is free to implement his policies, but he has to do so in a way that doesn't violate federal law, doesn't violate the United States Constitution, doesn't violate our many other procedures and protocols that have long been in place. And all the way back from the time of Marbury v. Madison in 1803, I mean, the law has been in the United States that the executive branch is not free to indiscriminately violate people's rights, and that the judiciary will hold them accountable. And when I ran for this office, originally in 2018, and then when I was reelected in 2022, I did so, with a pledge that I would defend the Michigan Constitution, I would defend the United States Constitution, and that I would make certain that the rights, the freedoms, the liberties of Michigan residents were properly protected against transgressions and trespasses from the federal government. And so I am keeping that promise. That is my job.
So when it comes to money, that Congress has appropriated, is it your assessment that the federal government, must spend that money as allocated? There are challenges to cuts in medical and public health research you've joined. Why can't the president just spend those dollars?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how those cuts are made, right? And so what we're seeing time and time again in a number of different ways is that the president could have the opportunity to do that legally. However, he's choosing to do it in an illegal and oftentimes unconstitutional fashion. And I can give you multiple examples of cases we've already filed. So whether it's the Office of Management and Budget memo that was distributed, on I think it was a Tuesday evening, and by Wednesday morning, the accounts to all 50 states were frozen immediately when it came to essential programming like Medicaid and SNAP and Head Start, and many initiatives involving law enforcement. And of course, these are carefully negotiated programs. And it is the job of Congress, who has the power of the purse, to decide what program gets how many dollars. And again, we have three branches of government, not just one, right? So, for the executive and especially just the president, utilizing this new agency is created, DOGE, where Elon Musk is just going agency to agency to agency, and in that instance, the Treasury Department, and saying, "Sorry, states, we know that you pay the federal government billions and billions of dollars every year. In the case of Michigan, well over $30 billion. And it comes back to the state in the form of this essential programming that, again, affects millions and millions and millions of Michiganders. But in one fell swoop, with no advance warning to Michigan state government, with no advance warning, even to the agencies that administer the programs federally, we're just going to completely cut off your funding to these essential life-saving and preserving programs. It is a flagrant violation of the law. It violates federal law and it violates the Constitution. And the courts have agreed with that. And we filed a case. The Democratic attorneys general filed a case in all our states. We received a restraining order almost immediately saying, like, no, you can't do that. That is not the way that you can go about deciding that you want to, trim what you believe is fat in the budget. I would argue those are essential programs that have been around a very long time. And whether you have a democratically controlled Congress or a Congress that has a Republican majority, they've decided that this program is important and it's essential, and to cut it off very suddenly is literally, it's just, cruelty masquerading somehow as fiscal responsibility, and it's illegal to do so. So, that is one example, but of course now we've had many other. You saw that on last Friday, out of nowhere, there was communication from the National Institute of Health that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these billions and billions of dollars of grants involving medical research and treatment to research centers, universities all over the United States, that suddenly there would be drastic, draconian cuts to those programs that would take place Monday morning. And for Michigan, that's about $266 billion that would have been cut over the course of just a weekend. So we immediately filed suit. Michigan was a lead on that. And by the end of the day, Monday, a restraining order was issued saying, no, you cannot do that. It's completely illegal for you to have done so. And we just saw a letter from the NIH yesterday that was distributed to all their grantees saying, all right, things are going to go back to normal because a federal court has told us that it's illegal to have done this. So I guess my point is, if you want to renegotiate these contracts, there's a way to do it. And yes, the president has great authority to step in and say, I don't like these contracts. And I think that, there should be a lower percentage of indirect costs. But you have to go, program by program by program and decide, can we spend less money on this program and achieve the same objective? Or do we want to decide not to fund this program at all? But you're taking these carefully negotiated agreements, negotiated by the federal government, negotiated by the Department of Health and Human Services, and overnight saying we're totally going to disregard that, even though these universities and these research centers have relied upon that heavily negotiated contract. And so that is the way in which they're trying to do things. And it's just it's illegal, it's immoral, it's unethical, and it's just unfair. It's not how you do business.
And, are you finding that the court can keep up with this level of challenges? Are you concerned at all? We've heard, with the federal funding freezes, that accounts were turned off or groups couldn't access money even after maybe a court said, no, they can't, just block this. Are you concerned at all that, by the time a court gets involved, damage is potentially already done?
I'm concerned on a number of different levels, right? I'm concerned about how it impacts that programming when the funding is suddenly without notice or warning shut off. I'm concerned about the time that it takes to sort of get the money flowing again and to, unfreeze those accounts and what happens in the meantime. But also I'm concerned about the fact that it doesn't appear as though the federal government is even following these court orders. And so we had to file on the OMB case, we had to file a motion to enforce because it was discovered that the government hadn't unfrozen all of that money. And to this day, I can tell you right now, there is programming coming from that is administered through the EPA, which then goes to our state agency, EGLE, under the Inflation Reduction Act and under the Infrastructure Act, that just never started again. So we are in a place right now where they can't continue to do any of that work because the money simply is not available to them. So that's multiple times that you're seeing court orders that are being openly defied. Now, the DOJ will have to answer, is that intentional or are you just having issues getting that program restarted again? I would argue it's very possible that it's the former rather than the latter. And again, the Department of Justice is, who represents the federal government, will have to answer to that. But what has me most concerned is this: the statements that we saw made by Elon Musk, who is, in my opinion, illegally overseeing all of these cuts and these terminations of contracts and employees and making all of these decisions on the fly with, of course, access to our very private, very personal information and all the information across all agencies of federal government. So that is of grave concern to me, but also the fact that you see Musk, you see J.D. Vance, the vice president of the United States, you see Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, who seemingly has completely abdicated the authority of the legislature, who oversees again the pocket of the power of the purse, and has said, like, well, I guess the legislature doesn't even matter anymore. We should just throw out this branch of government altogether. But you also see sentiments echoed by the president of the United States saying, I'm not sure that we're going to follow these court orders. And they are disparaging the federal judges, some of whom were actually appointed by Donald Trump himself, and them calling them these left-wing, liberal, radical, judges. You appointed one of these guys, and now you're calling him a radical left-wing judge. So basically, and they're threatening to impeach judges as well. So it sends a chilling effect, I think, all across government, all across the United States, to have these really critical actors and elected officials saying, you know what, are we going to obey and comply with these court orders? I don't know, TBD. We'll let you know later. I mean, that's something we've never, ever seen before in the federal government. And to be candid with you, it's scary as hell.
So you've called Elon Musk's, Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, saying, the access to sensitive information is unlawful. You just said kind of his heading of that agency is illegal. What is illegal about what DOGE is doing right now?
Virtually everything. You have a situation, right, where Elon Musk is making all of these decisions. Here's a person, right, who has not been vetted. He doesn't have a background check. He's not submitted what most federal employees have to do, which is, a financial disclosure report showing all of his many, many conflicts of interest. And let's be clear, he has so many contracts with the federal government. The fact that he gets to look at contracts of his competitors and say, well, maybe that's not a good contract. I think I'm going to cut that contract. I mean, that's insane. And, he's never been confirmed by the Senate. So here he's making these decisions that normally would have to be made in concert, either by a confirmed director of an agency or a secretary of an agency. He's like a super director or a super secretary because he has authority over all of the, confirmed, or in some cases here, acting secretaries and directors, for him to be able to make all of the decisions as to what occurs within those particular agencies. And again, he's never been vetted. He's never provided a financial disclosure form, and he's never been confirmed by the Senate. So, we believe that violates, it's not just a separation of powers issue, of course, but it's a violation of the Appointments Clause, which very clearly states that for people to have these positions, why are we even bothering with the procedure and the process that we've seen played out with all these other cabinet secretaries and these high-level directors if none of it is going to apply to Elon Musk, who I would argue has greater authority than all of them put together?
So I want to pivot a little bit to the 2026 election. Michigan has an open U.S. Senate seat with Senator Peters deciding not to seek re-election. Are you interested in that? And how seriously are you potentially considering that?
Well, first of all, that was a surprise, I think, to all of us, even elected officials in the Democratic Party. I think the only thing more surprising, of course, was when Senator Stabenow said she wasn't running again. But, no one had any hint that Senator Peters would make that decision. So it came up all of a sudden. I had made it very clear, it's not a secret to anyone, that I was not seeking to run for governor, unlike everyone predecessor that I've had in the last 50 years. In fact, I think, the initials AG are better known for aspiring governor than they are for anything else. But I made that very clear that I didn't intend to use this office as a platform to run for governor. I had never even considered the United States Senate prior to this announcement. And in all candor, I've been, as you might know, a little busy since that occurred. So I will just say this, I'm not ruling anything out and I'm not ruling anything in. To me, my main focus, my laser focus has to be on protecting the people of this state. And I don't know that people fully appreciate the grave harms that could have come to all our state residents had we not been successful in securing these temporary restraining orders on all of these many cases, many that we haven't even had an opportunity to talk about because there have been so many of them. But again, would have been devastating to the budget of the state of Michigan and to our treasury, would have been devastating to the millions and millions of people that are recipients of these critical programs. So I'm trying to do my day job, and which really honestly means working, sometimes 18, 19-hour days just to keep up, because we've had so many lawsuits, or even in other cases where we don't have lawsuits, we have to issue guidance to our state agencies about what a new executive order or memorandum released by, whether it's from OMB, whether it's from, the new United States Attorney General. We have to dissect all that, see exactly what it means, see how to advise our state agencies on that, and see if we need to make some sort of public declaration, as we did, honestly, with the case in which we saw, of course, Corewell Health stopped providing medical assistance to a segment of their patients. And so, sometimes we're putting out guidance just like, hey, as a reminder, I want everybody to know what the law is. We did that, in fact, on one of the education-related EOs, where it wasn't a matter of us filing a lawsuit, but I did put out, a statement and a video basically saying, hey, teachers who are worried that you're going to be prosecuted by the federal government for something called radical indoctrination, again, whatever that is, here's how a law is passed, just as a refresher course. Here's how criminal statutes are made federally. Here is how they're made under state law. We don't have either a federal or a state law called radical indoctrination. that is illegal. So, things like that I feel like we have to do on a continuing basis because the public is so afraid. And I think the intent of the Trump administration is to scare the hell out of people. And I sort of feel like it's my job to take down the temperature and clarify and say, hey, everybody, just so you know, here's what the law is and what it requires. And here's what the law is not and what you should not take away from these orders, because there's so much misinformation and disinformation out there. So this very long way of me, avoiding your question, but basically saying, I don't know what my future holds in terms of seeking another elected office, because I am so focused right now on doing what I believe is the very important job of being Michigan Attorney General.
All right, great. Well, I think that's a good spot to end it here. Attorney General Nessel, thank you so much for joining MichMash today.
Thanks so much for having me.